All right. Well, my name's Lana Widener, and I am with the purchasing department. So glad you guys could be here today. I know we haven't been in touch for a while, so we talk on the phone or through emails periodically throughout the year. But I always like to have this one time for sure purchasing highlights and updates and year-end activities that we have coming along. So let me just give you the agenda for today. We are going to review some thoughts with the requisition approval workflow that changed in January. What changed? And we're going to talk about that. How to make POs move more quickly. Quantity of one versus that amount only. I know some of you are familiar with it, some may not be, and I just want to cover that again. What is a blanket purchase order? Um, you know, we want to really, as we come into this new fiscal year, we wanted to cover that. Purchases under, yeah, somebody's microphone's on, so you may want to turn it off. Purchases under 5,000, consolidated services, strategic sourcing, closing fiscal year 22 and 23 purchase orders, fiscal year cutover, and purchase order roll from the year 23 to 24. Can you believe it? Those who have been here for a while, here we are again, another fiscal year ending. All right, well, let's just talk. And if you do really have a question, I can't see your questions right now. So if you really do want to speak up, you go right ahead. Turn your microphones back on if you need to, or I'll check the chats in a little bit at the end of our presentation. So the requisition approval workflow did, as I mentioned, changed in January. We've added the last layer of approval is purchasing. So what happens is you might say, where is my requisition? And anybody that's taken my class, the first class in purchasing requisitions, knows that this is my very favorite page called the Manage Requisition page. You can put your requisition number in and you can just drill down and you can go to the approvals icon that you see here highlighted. And you can then see a list of who's approving. So what's happened here, the approval in this particular one went to a level 1, a level 2, and then it had to have IT approval. And then it went to one of our sourcing clerks here in our office, which Edna, Andrea, and I'm a backup. So Edna and Andrea receive it and they determine who that requisition needs to be assigned to. And in this case, it was assigned to me. So you, as a requisitioner, or if somebody in your office asks you, you can always go back into PeopleSoft and say, well, my requisition is at this status. So remember, this page right here, this is the lifespan of your requisition. That's really important to understand. It's not your purchase order, but it's your requisition. So here, click that icon, and then you can see the status of it. It's running through. At this point, that requisition actually moved forward today into my bench as a purchase order. It was a sole source. It needed some attention prior to me approving it. So I say in here, the buyer will review the procurement method as well as the requisition prior to approving the requisition. So for the case of this sole source document, I had to make sure that I had a sole source justification and other pertinent information to help move it forward and to get the approvals. So if there were any questions, I could reach out. And in this particular case, Marjorie King was the requisitioner, and she reached out to me and just saying, hey, how are we doing? She knows this workflow process, so she's already understands who has her requisition, and she knew it was me. So hopefully that makes some sense. That kicked in January, but you can certainly see the status and where it is. We wanted to cover this. We know that making purchase orders move more quickly is really important to everyone. It's important to you, it's important to us. And so we wanted to kind of focus on a few things that might help you. Purchase requisitions are for pre-planned purchases. It's not for invoices. It's not for, hey, I've already bought it. So what we're here is, once we get that requisition, we determine what the procurement method is. If you do by chance have an invoice and you think you want to do a requisition, we ask that you reach out to the controller's office or accounts payable. We are asking not to submit our invoices with the requisition. It is not a payment method. It is definitely a pre-planned method. So we're encouraging you to switch gears a little bit and talk to your departments, encourage them to say, hey, purchasing is going to start, pushing back on us on these invoices because they need these pre-planned. We need to plan ahead. So when you are doing your requisition, there were a few things that I just wanted to make sure to highlight, kind of talk to one or two of the staff members, what would help make this requisition move a little bit more smoothly. Your description is really important. Requisitions that only provide like a part number, it's not descriptive enough. We need to know what it is. So if you say it's in that line item, it's part number 3333, that doesn't tell me what we're buying. So if you tell me it's toilet paper, 24-inch, fits on a whatever roll spool, that's being more descriptive. So make sure that that information is descriptive. And typically you get that from the quote. We know that sometimes the quotes may only give a little information. You may have to reach out to your salesperson and say, hey, I need it more descriptive. Purchasing needs to know what we're doing. I need to know what we're doing. You want to know what you're buying, right? So if you were to buy something in the store, you would want to know exactly what it is. The other is unit price. Make sure that it's the unit price based on what the quote says. Quantity, make sure you have that correct. And attachments. Attachments is another big thing. So that's why I put examples here. So an example of an attachment, definitely you want your quote or proposal. If it's a sole source, it needs the justification memo. If you're putting it out for bid, we need the specifications, preferably in Word, so that we can use that information. If you have to have the conference site selection, if you're doing a 3-quote method, where your emails to the vendors, just any type of justification has to be attached to that requisition. The only thing I can think of that you would not have an attachment is a blanket order. And even then you may have one. But any other type of procurement should have some type of attachment. We're really encouraging that you do that. We know sometimes that there's some push to get it into our hands, but then it has to sit till we get the information from you. So please take a look at that, review that process, maybe internal with your area, that those attachments are there. We know sometimes it gets forgotten. That happens. We all forget something, but on the norm, we would definitely want you to be submitting those. And then I've noticed recently, if we have multiple lines on requisitions, occasionally we have that supplier is being missed on maybe 1 or 2 of the lines. So be sure to check before you save and submit that you have the supplier noted on every line. The due date, we encourage you to put down the expected date of delivery or services. If it's a blanket order, it's going to be the end of the fiscal year. And if it's a project, it's based on the project that you're working on, typically like a grants project. The due date, if you do not fill it in, it will default to 30 days. So if it's a blanket order, we know it's not 30 days. So we do encourage you. And the reason why is when we run batch processes to close purchase orders, if for some reason you're at a $0 balance, it's going to close that purchase order, even though you may have been ready to process a change order, but the due date has expired, the balance is 0, and it will close. So I encourage you to do it correctly. Also, the due date prints on the purchase order, so it provides information to our supplier to know when we expect delivery or service. The other thing that just would be helpful, if you know the state contract number, if you're purchasing something off of the state contract, or if you're using a university contract, if you'll note those numbers in your justification areas of your requisition. I know some of you may have questions on these. I will be glad to answer them either at the end of our webinar, or if I need to come back in a separate email, I'll be able to do that with you as well. All right, and then also within the requisition, we like to cover this. I mentioned that this is something I frequently visit. When you're creating a requisition, PeopleSoft requires us to put a unit price in. And then once we get into the unit price and we check out, we're on this checkout page, we have a quantity of one and we have a price amount. We encourage, if you are going to have multiple payments against a line, that you check this amount only box here in this column to allow multiple payments. That's really what that does. So when you check, when do you check the amount only box? When you expect multiple payments or the quantity is a one. Definitely on services, blanket orders, grants, construction projects, anything like that, you should be checking that box because it allows multiple payments. If you don't check it and say it is a blanket order, the first payment made closes that line and no other invoices can be paid. So it eats up that quantity of one. So that's what that's doing. There is one exception, of course, and that's when you're using the supplier to be bid on your requisition. We ask that you do not check the amount only box. For some reason, there's a condition created by the requisition line when it's copied into our solicitations. We're now doing those online. And and you should, if you happen to do that with a supplier to be bid, you should get an alert. So just double check that. And most people that see it are unchecking the box for those, but that's the only time that you would uncheck it or not check it. All right, so blanket purchase orders. Here we are. It's May 24th, and you might be asking, when can we put blanket purchase orders in, or when can we start doing requisitions? So before I tell you all that, and I know it's on the screen, but I do want to explain what a blanket order is. It's just, it's pretty simple to me, but if you've never done a blanket order, maybe this is a new thing. So it's a simplified method of filling repetitive needs for small quantities of miscellaneous, that's a really key word, miscellaneous supplies, services, or information technology. What it does, it allows us to reduce the administrative cost with small purchases, because you're not having to create a new requisition, all the time. We used to kind of have a parameter set that if you had at least 12 invoices in a year, you probably want to consider the blanket requisition of blanket PO, because, and these are again for this miscellaneous supplies. So miscellaneous is a key word. It's not for projects, it's not for things like that, but just be sure to review that if you're unsure when you're creating a requisition. If you need to ask, I give at the end here our email address, but just ask us and we'll be glad to let you know if that fits in with the definition of a blanket order. They are valid for 1 year. They're closed every fiscal year. I do note a couple of things in here that the 1-year service agreement is not a blanket order, and an annual software license is not a blanket order. So it may have an effective date, but it's not a blanket order. They are going to open up our budget period on June the 6th to allow us to start doing requisitions that it allows the money to be encumbered in the fiscal year 23-24. The requisition will still be in this fiscal year, but your general ledger funds are going to be in 23-24. So that's helpful, hopefully, to you. You can start entering them at that point. They do need to have a line description. I've noted 3 things here. You need to make sure in the line description that you also, so you have the description of what you're purchasing. Then you also note that it's for fiscal year 23-24, and it's a blanket order. And then who are your authorized users? You need at least one. Sometimes I've seen 5 or 6. So who's authorized to use that purchase order to contact the vendor or supplier and say, hey, I need to order these supplies based off of this purchase order. It has to be a person on that purchase order. So that way the vendor knows that you're authorized to make purchases. We do close the prior fiscal year purchase orders at the end of July. We kind of wait a little bit to make sure the controller's office has had the opportunity to close out the fiscal year. And so we won't close out July until the end of July, 1st of August. Okay, so blanket orders will close for the prior year. Okay. It is strongly encouraged for purchases under 5,000 that we use our purchasing card for transactions that have a value up to the 49.99, that they need to obviously meet the purchasing card policy with any applicable fees, sales tax, shipping, etc. So we wanted just to note a couple of things that it includes under that 5,000, any operational or educational supplies, select contractual services such as repairs, memberships, fees and dues can be used, and information technology such as computers, toner cartridges, e-devices, and cellular. I did we added this note that Dell Punchout should be reserved for purchases exceeding a single transaction limit of $49.99. So if you're going to go over that amount, then definitely you need to use a requisition to purchase order. So, but you can use the P card for Dell Punchout. You can use it for state contract items like furniture, as long as it's under the $5,000 limit. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that that was shared with you. And just for those who've been with us for a few years, this is probably not new, but we just wanted to revisit that. Okay. And we wanted to make sure you were aware of a couple things with consolidated services. We do have, and when we upload this PowerPoint, the inventory for Form 7 and the word purchasing toolbox, those are links. And so you'll be able to just click these links on. So when you have any equipment or furniture, you need to complete the inventory Form 7, and we do have it also in the purchasing toolbox. If you need to talk to somebody and make an appointment with someone, we've given you two phone numbers here, the 2156 and the 9001, that reaches Teddy and Larry and their group in Consolidated Services. And they will be closing for inventory. They usually send out a notice, but it'll be the last week in June. And they have moved. So we wanted to make sure you knew they had a new location. So if you are turning things in, you know where it is, or if you are seeking used supplies or furniture, you know where they're located and where you can go. But definitely you want to call them ahead of time and work any details out with them. Strategic sourcing. We introduced this in 2021 and we went live. This is an online bidding module in PeopleSoft. And what this does, it allows our suppliers now to submit online bids in lieu of mailing hard copies. And this is typically for goods and services. Construction still, we still receive those here in the office. But the goods and services, it's been working great. We've been getting our bids online. It allows for competitive bids and proposals to be uploaded and respond that way. So when you submit that requisition to be bid, to be bid supplier, it alerts us that there's a strategic sourcing need. In other words, that we're going to create this event. We have a couple of staff that receive an email alert and notice and let them know that we have a to-be bid requisition, and then it's assigned to one of the buyers in the office. So the buyer then will create the event and they pull your line in and just copy it right into it. After the event's analyzed and awarded, it goes, to a supplier. We create the contract, a purchase order, whatever is needed in that particular procurement. I wanted to just share with you how that kind of looks for the vendor, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the other part. But basically, we have this link, supplier.ps.sc.edu, and we have several tiles. This is also used for our suppliers who need to go in and make a change or get added to the supplier system. So it is called the supplier portal. But for us, for construction and for goods and services, we have a tile here that says review solicitations. And so anybody, you can go out there and see what we're doing, and any supplier, anybody worldwide can go out and look at our website and see any solicitations we have. So I love it. I love that they can do this. They can do their offer registration on this page. They can, as I said, the supplier ID request can be done there as well. So how does that help you? So I mentioned that that's how the suppliers can see it, but how can you see it? So off of, like in PeopleSoft, I mentioned manage requisitions, right, is one of my favorite pages. So we're going to go back into manage requisitions, and I want you to see the beauty of how you can find the lifespan of your requisition for an event or for a solicitation. Then when you go into this manage requisition page and you type in your requisition ID number, if you just click with your right mouse, this will open related information, and you can just click that on. Or you can, if you're in the body of your requisition and you're on the checkout page, there's a related content. You can also see it there. But I typically go to manage requisition. I like to drill down a little bit, take a look at it. So once I clicked that little button, I come down here, my requisition's showing. I hit view results and I come down and I'm like, oh, let's see. Yep, this person is the requester. Here's my requisition number. Here's my event number, 230123. It's been awarded. It started in January. It finished in February. I'm still looking. Oh, there it is. Kristen is my buyer, right? She's my procurement officer. And in this example, maybe it hasn't been awarded yet, and maybe it hasn't finished, but it started. I won't have these columns won't display anything, but Kristen's name will be displayed, and you'll have her email as well. And typically, the buyer and you are communicating pretty quickly when you get a an assigned solicitation. But if you're one of those that look every day at your requisitions and check your status, this is one way you can see who your buyer assigned is. I love it. I love that you can see it. I have to thank our consultant when he was here, who created that alert for you and for us to be able to monitor and see where things are. So, strategic sourcing. I know I'm probably having some questions, so for just a minute, I am hoping that you guys are jotting notes and writing down what you have. All right, closing. It's that time of year, closing. So we are getting quite a few emails, and they are great and wonderful. You guys, those who have been here for a while, know to send any request to close a purchase order to our purchasing mailbox. And what will happen, and what I'm doing now, is running a batch process. So I'm closing purchase orders about once a week. And then when we get in toward the end, we'll be closing them every day. But if a purchase order is fully matched and has that $0 encumbrance I mentioned, it will be closed. So you don't need to send us an email. But if it has a penny left on it or $5,000 and you say, I'm done with this purchase order, I'm ready to close it, just go ahead and send. But make sure the invoice has been paid first. We have closed some before. We've had some people really on top of it and had us close the POs, and the invoice hadn't quite cleared yet. So make sure the invoice has been paid first. And then once we close it, your encumbered money goes back into your funds and it goes back to the general ledger. So that releases money. And I can promise you, we all want to get our money back if we can. I think about it on a personal note. I like to get my refunds or my money back if there's anything left. Purchase orders that are not closed, though, what happens to those? If a purchase order isn't closed, it's not a blanket order, and it's a project and I still have money on it, we're just going to roll that into the new fiscal year. We're going to move it over from year 22-23 to 23-24. So it will roll, it will move forward into the new fiscal year. We'll be doing that as well. So we do get sometimes the question, how can I check what the status of my purchase order is? So we've given you the query navigation below. This allows you to look at your purchase order and you can say, okay, I have a purchase order for VWR. I go out and I put the purchase order number in my search and I look at it and it says dispatched. That means it's still open. But if it says complete, that means it's closed. Okay. This is how you look at purchase orders. When you're on the manage requisition page, remember, you're not looking at purchase orders, you're looking at requisitions. When we close the requisitions, and that will happen on June the 16th, when we close those, all your requisitions created in fiscal year 22-23 will show a status of complete. But it doesn't mean your purchase order is. Remember, if there's money left on it, it stays open. So we'll be closing any approved requisitions will be processed and moved on forward, but anything after 12 o'clock, and if it's hanging and an approver hasn't approved it, basically we close them down. So we will kill them, if you will, and we'll try, if there are any that have been critically, you've made me aware, or send an email to the purchasing mailbox. We'll do our best to reopen it and move it forward. But that is a really tight time frame. We don't have a lot of time to move and close these. The good news is that's all June 16th and previous is for fiscal year money of 22-23. Once you begin on the 19th creating a new requisition, that money there is for fiscal year 23-24. Any of those requisitions, as long as we haven't completed the PO, those all carry into fiscal year 24. So any PO roll processes, we perform those. This year is a little earlier. We'll be doing that on July the 6th. So July the 6th, I'll be working with a team of people, and we'll be rolling any purchase orders from fiscal year 22-23 where the PO still has money left on it. It's going to liquidate all the money from that fiscal year and move it into fiscal year 23-24. Hope that makes some sense. So know that your purchase order, if it has any money on it, moves over. We keep it open. Nothing's going to happen. It just has a little time span there that they won't be able to make any payments during a certain part of the day, but they'll be able to, usually by the end of the day or the next day, they can start making payments against a purchase order. Any requisition lines that were created in fiscal year 22-23, they're not going to be linked to that PO anymore. And I'm not going to really go into change request right now, but because the requisition is considered complete, if you do have to do a change request on a previous year PO, you'll have to do a new requisition. So not a big deal. A lot of you are familiar with that, and we'll be happy to help anybody that needs that. And certainly in some training. All right. I know I've done a lot of talking, but we wanted to make sure to kind of highlight how to get a hold of us. We thought this was really important. We have a receptionist, and she's here. I would say 24/7, but we do let her off in the evenings and weekends. So our phone number is listed 777-4115. Purchasing mailbox address. We have a consolidated services phone numbers I mentioned earlier. And then for those who just kind of want to see who's out there and who's in our department, we have a purchasing staff list on our purchasing website. We have a few new people starting soon, so look for new information coming up in that area. So we're excited to be able to welcome some new folks and help you move those purchase orders along a little quicker. So with that said, I want to see if I can get back with you and see what questions you may have and how I can help you. So, all right, we have a few. I'm going to come live. So let me scroll back up. And before I go to questions, I did want to offer opportunity to any of my purchasing coworkers, and if they had any input or thoughts or questions or comments before I go to the questions.
I have one. This is Candace Golston.
Yes.
When you talked about blanket purchase orders, just keep in mind when they're exceeding $10,000, it could be considered as a blanket purchase order as well. So a procurement method has to still be determined. So whether or not it's a state contract and you have a blanket purchase order, if you have to obtain 3 written quotes, it could be a blanket purchase order, but when it exceeds $10,000, a procurement method has to be determined.
Thank you, Candace. There are times that we'll encourage you, if you're purchasing the same supplies, that if you can also have multiple vendors that you share the wealth with them, that would be awesome as well. I think Mac is answering some of my questions along the way. I see that now. So let me still just make sure we're all on the same page. Um, Purchases under 5,000, strategic sourcing closing. Let's see. I'm going to just see if I can go to the chat and make sure I'm in the right place. Okay.
Mac has been monitoring for you, Lana.
I was like, it looks like Mac's been answering. So thank you. Are there any questions that Mac hasn't answered that you would like to have addressed? Okay. Anything else? Anybody else have anything that they wanted to add?
I would. This is Kim Rose in purchasing, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Just wanted to piggyback on what Lana has already discussed about the requisitions. If you're trying to purchase small order supplies and the vendor will not accept the procurement card, if you would indicate in the notes. If not, we may contact you and ask you or someone in your department if they would use their procurement card. Again, there may be a situation where they don't accept it, but if you would put in the notes, it will help us so that we don't further delay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? Just going to go down to the bottom of the chat just to make sure we got everybody. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you have a great day. Have fun with year end and have fun with purchasing. Thanks, everybody.